You are listening to Scream with Ryan C. Showers, the podcast for Scream fans just like you. Join Ryan every week as he takes a deep dive into the horror film series that defined the 90s and redefined the genre. Scream with Ryan C. Showers is your source for scene and quote analysis, character dissections, and the latest news about upcoming installments of the Scary Movie franchise.
I hear you like horror movies, Kirby, but do you like them as much as him?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Scream with Ryan C. Showers podcast, where the film critic meets the Scream fan twice a week, every Tuesday and Friday. I'm your host, Ryan C. Showers. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Before I go any further, I need to thank the producers and administrators of Scream with Ryan C. Showers. First, I need to thank TJ Jones, who does all of the graphic design work from the podcast. Also, I need to thank Ashley Summers, Mark Vieira, Sarah Campbell, and Sam Levy for helping me keep the podcast and Patreon community afloat. Thank you to everybody who subscribes to the Patreon at any and every tier. I'm an independent entity, so any bit of support that comes into the Patreon goes back into the podcast. Joining the Patreon gets you ad-free and early access to every episode, as well as the opportunity to join the community of the show. We have group chats across social media. In particular, Instagram is really the hub of the podcast community. More importantly, joining the Patreon is the vessel in which you would use to come onto the podcast, either in a one-on-one situation with me or a small panel. In addition, there's a guaranteed invite every month to a big group Zoom recording about a Scream topic. An exciting feature of the podcast is the audio commentary episodes. Every Scream fan knows what it was like listening to Wes Craven do the audio commentaries for the original trilogy and Scream 4, with Marianne Maddalena and Kevin Williamson and Patrick Lussier. And what I'm trying to do for my Patreon subscribers is I am going to be performing an audio commentary of a Scream or a Scream-related movie, one per month, every month. And my goal is to try to approach these as I'm doing deep analytical analysis about the characters, about the themes, about just general reaction. So it's something that I'm really proud of and I hope continues to be a cherished part of the podcast. So the commentary is available as a normal podcast episode for anybody to listen to like they would any other podcast, but it will also be available as a video watch along. So everybody, please go over to Patreon, subscribe to Scream with RCS. I would be eternally grateful. So I need to go through and thank everybody over at Patreon who is subscribed as a stab investor or a daddy/mama Ghostface. So the daddy/mama Ghostface of the Patreon are Carrie Tenney, Brett Janovich, Corey Wilson, and Stevie Shears. The stab investors include Allie, Amar Karim, Tamika Jones, David D., Garrison Nichols, Gustavo Mora, Jess Mariano, Joey Nobarini, aka The Vault, Josh Calamari, Josh Carr, Scream Queens podcast, both Josh and Justine, The Horror Project podcast, Kevin Abner, Mark Vieira, PWO5, aka Philip Douglas, Quentin Harrison, and Sam Levy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Scream with Ryan C. Showers. I'm your host, Ryan C. Showers, and today we are covering a book that was written about Wes Craven last year. It was published in 2024. It's called The Soul of Wes Craven, and I'm sitting here with the author, Joseph Maddrey. Hey, Joseph.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, you wrote a book about Wes Craven. Hey, first of all, wonderful cover. Who did the cover art?
That's Bill Sienkiewicz, who's a big name in graphic novels, and he had actually done the cover of one of my previous books, Not Bad for a Human, which was the autobiography of actor Lance Henriksen, who, as a Scream 3 fan, you may know a thing or two about Lance.
Of course. Mr. Alien, Mr. John Milton, of course.
Yeah.
So, very cool. So, Joseph, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your background before you wrote this book about our hero, Wes Craven?
I don't know, man. Let's see. Where do I start? I don't know. I'm a lifelong horror geek. I suppose that the thing that really kind of set my career in motion, such as it is, was in college. I wrote a book called Nightmares in Red, White, and Blue, kind of as a senior thesis, just geeking out about American horror films in cultural context. And that then was my first published book. It helped me to get my first real job in television. And there was a chapter in there on Wes Craven. So, flash forward a few years, I ended up making a documentary out of that book. And one of the first interviews that I pursued was with Wes. I was living in Studio City, California at the time. Wes had an office actually down the street, walking distance from me. So I basically walked in there with a copy of my book and kind of pleaded my case for an interview, which I did not get because he had just left for Connecticut to start pre-production on My Soul to Take. This was back in 2008, I think. So he popped up again and said he was ready for his interview like a week or two after I had delivered the master of my documentary. So it was gone. So I kind of, I did a little bit of a bluff and said, well, I'm thinking about writing a book about you. Can we do the interview anyway? And he said, yeah, come by. We'll have lunch. And so we sat and had this 2-hour lunch, where the great thing about it was that because I wasn't doing it for a documentary, I wasn't chasing sound bites. I didn't need, content to fill gaps in a narrative. So we ended up just having a really casual conversation. And I want to turn this around on you a little bit, because Wes turned this around on me, where I went in to interview him, and he, before I could get a word in, he said, listen, I want to know where you're coming from. I want to know, why you're interested in me, why you might want to write this book. So I want to ask you, because I keep meaning to do this and I never do, but what was it about the book, The Soul of Wes Craven? As somebody who knows a lot about Wes, knows about his films, what did you like about it? What surprised you about it? I'm really curious.
So the thing that surprised me most about your book is I felt like you really got into Wes's skin, if that makes sense, and really found like a way to describe his inner life and kind of like what he was going through. And this isn't just a book about Wes's films. It's a book about him and his childhood. It's an interesting book because would I call it a biography? Not necessarily, because you spend so much time on the films themselves, but I wouldn't call it just a recap of movies. It's like it's a cool balance of both. And I guess to understand Wes, you have to understand both where he came from, how he grew up, and his personal life, in addition to the movies. So I think the thing that struck me most about that was just how, I don't know, I got this sense from your book about Wes being a sadder person than I think of him as. I think of him as like the calm presence who keeps everybody at bay on the chaotic scream sets, and somebody who's very intellectual and loves engaging with people. But I get this like lingering sadness about Wes from reading your book, and not like that he was unfulfilled, but that he was always, Wes dealt with a lot of pushback from everybody. I think that he wore those emotions on his sleeve, and that's something that I didn't expect, and it really affected me reading this book. The thing I was surprised by about your book that I really liked was I thought your coverage of the Scream films was very nice and objective. And so for instance, a huge pet peeve of mine is when people are unnecessarily mean to Scream 3. And I love Scream 3. It's my favorite of the films. And I thought you covered it with such class and grace, and that is different from other authors out there, other people out there. So I really respected you for that.
Yeah, well, I think Scream 3 was a really important film for Wes. I mean, I think it's, on one hand, I think a lot of people will look at it and go, well, he kind of only did it because he wanted to do music of the heart. This was something that he basically agreed to do in order to get something else that he wanted. So people assume that he wasn't invested in Scream 3 as much. I mean, I think he was so deeply invested, especially in the Sidney Prescott character, but really in Sidney, Gale, and Dewey as a trio, and the ability to, give all of them an arc, and create a trilogy, which is something you don't see a lot in horror franchises, especially then, and to have one person kind of in control of it or overseeing it all. I think that the ending, especially of Scream 3, where Sidney leaves the door open, is like, I mean, that is a heart on his sleeve moment. That is Wes. That is Wes where he was at that point in his life. And it was important to him to end that way, not to end with like a cheap jolt, the way that, because that was something that was forced on him with so many horror movies in the past, that this is what you do with a horror movie. And he gave it a conclusion where he could say, these characters have grown. This character's in a healthy place right now. And there's almost a paternal quality to that, right? The way he's treating Sidney and treating these characters, that Dewey and Gale get together and Sidney gets a new beginning, and that they aren't irreparably damaged by this, that the horror gets to end.
Well, and it's not even just the epilogue, which is beautiful. And so unlike things that we would expect in a slasher film, to your point, but even in the screening room with Sidney and Roman, like there are things in that sequence, different emotional beats that go unnoticed by people, of just how masterful they are. And just, you can't tell me that Wes Craven didn't have passion and zeal to make this movie, with like Sidney holding Roman's hand at the end before, as he's kind of dying, before she gets up, Gale yelling for Sidney after she's shot from like the other side of the door. Like those things are really deep and sharp and powerful. And I just, so I think that a lot of the criticism of Scream 3, and it's gotten better. I think there's been a recontextualization of Scream 3. I think to criticize Scream 3 in the way that it was, 15 years ago is a very outdated way of looking at that movie in today's world. But I just want to tell you, so pages 329, I literally have earmarked. I don't know if you can see. So this is where he talks about the ending of Scream 3. And kind of, I've quoted these paragraphs at least 3 or 4 times on the podcast since the book came out, because I found it so beautiful how you describe Wes and everything you just said about him feeling protective of giving Sydney a conclusion and about her family and the trio. You did a really beautiful job at summarizing his point of view and making Scream 3 especially.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because I felt a real sense of responsibility to get Wes right, to get him right as a person. And I think, I think he was a deeply compassionate person. I think he was someone who was really kind of sensitive to what other people were going through and intelligent enough to kind of pick up on things pretty quickly and then to try to meet people where they were coming from. And I think also, I think throughout his life, he really was kind of a melancholy guy. And I think a lot of that's sort of rooted in his childhood. He had a pretty troubled childhood, and when that's the case, I think a certain kind of melancholy gets kind of baked in on a really deep level. And the darkness that you see in his movies, I think in a lot of cases was a darkness in him, but it's not necessarily what you would think of for a lot of horror filmmakers, where when you say darkness, you think like anger. I mean, I think he had anger, but I think you're right that he had a lot of sadness in him. And I think that compassion for the human characters and that sadness is something that is in his best movies. It's something that I can't not notice now. And I notice it in a lot of times in like the music cues, or just in the breathing space of a moment, and the music cue that he will select. And also birds. Like once you know that Wes was a birder, you hear bird calls everywhere in his films. And the tone of the bird, the choice of the bird call, I think is a reflection of what the tone of the scene is supposed to be for him. What kind of bird is it actually gives you a clue into what Wes was thinking about what the tone should be there.
That's incredible. But that makes complete sense. So why don't you tell me more about like what your experience was like whenever you got to sit down with him and speak with him? And did you know at that point that you wanted to write a book about him, or you had a lot to say about him?
I knew that I wanted to write about him. I don't think it was kind of a, as I said, it was a little bit of a bluff, in that I had done the Nightmares in Red, White, and Blue documentary, and I'd interviewed all these people, and I'd gotten to, I think the first book that came while I was doing Nightmares, I wrote a book about Tom McLaughlin that was a Q&A book. He was one of the filmmakers that I interviewed for the documentary. And then that gave me a little bit of comfort, because it was the first time I'd really based a book on first-person interviews and on that kind of primary research. And immediately after that, I started talking to Lance Henriksen, who had done the voiceover narration for the documentary. And we ended up doing a book together, and we were in the middle of that. I mean, I was like going to Lance's house every week, and we were having these marathon conversations and trying to figure out what the book would be. And I was doing all of that at the time that Wes sort of popped up and said, "Hey, I'm ready for an interview." So I couldn't much think past writing the biography of Lance, and then Lance and I ended up doing a graphic novel together. And it was a couple of years before I really was able to go, all right, let me listen to this interview that I did with Wes, and what do I have here? Now, by the time I got to that, John Woolley had put out a book called Wes Craven, The Man and His Nightmares, and I went, shit.
Yeah.
Like somebody beat me to the punch, and that's over and done with. And damn, I missed it. And then not long after that, Wes was gone. And so it was a few years later, I think it was right before the COVID lockdown, when I re-listened to that interview, and I went, there's a lot of personal stuff here about his childhood and about his experiences in college and stuff that was not in John's book, John Woolley's book, was not in, he'd maybe made some references to certain things in interviews over the years, Wes had, but he hadn't really gone in depth. And I just started to get obsessed, which is how I started. I just start going, I really want to know more about this. And that book doesn't exist. I can't cheat and go to a book and just read about it. So I have to write the book. I have to do the work. So Wes was gone. So I started trying to track down things that he'd written in high school and college. And then when he was at Johns Hopkins getting a master's degree, got a copy of the novel that he wrote, Noah's Ark, which is unpublished, and just found all this stuff. And then the obsession just keeps rolling. And I start going, these other names of people who ran these literary magazines that he was published in, or who published stories alongside him. I wonder if I can find them. And so I started tracking them down. It just kept going and going, going. And then once I learned so much about his early life, the stuff that most people don't know, I was rewatching the films in a different light. And I was talking to people who knew him really well, who were saying things like, well, the films are his biography.
They are.
And so that's, I think, why I wrote the kind of book that you're talking about, which is sort of a critical biography where it's about the films, but it's also about why he made them the way he made them, why they were important to him.
No, and I think your goal with that, it's like you achieve it so well. I had such a great time reading this book because it was both learning so much about Wes and that personal side of him. And like a lot of the details, like, I had kind of vaguely known, if that makes sense, before the book, but I didn't have the clarity about his life before this book. And I've read other things about him, but this book was just like, it was a different experience. And then on top of that, it was fun to dive deep into the movies and the specific emotional, and I don't mean to keep emphasizing that, but there is something so emotional about the way that Wes approached each of the movies and the struggles he had with each of the movies, even movies that he didn't do, like, just even like the process of negotiating, like, the Nightmare sequels, for instance, how he always kind of was involved, but passed for this reason or that reason.
Or got kicked to the curb. Yeah. I mean, it's a journey. The first book that was written about Wes by a journalist named Brian Robb, he did an interview with Wes where Wes said, when people write about me, write about my career, I'm aware that they see like a trajectory. They see a straight line as if I intended all of this. And of course, the reality of making movies or being in the entertainment industry in general is that like, it's all about the timing. You can have a kind of a perfect project, a perfect idea, something you really want to do. And there can be all these kind of arbitrary reasons why it doesn't happen. And then something will fall in your lap that you don't even want to do. And it can be your biggest success. I mean, that kind of happened with Scream. He did not, he really kind of like fought kicking and screaming to go into doing the first Scream. And yet he was the only person who could have made Scream what it is. I mean, I think the tone just would not be there. If you didn't have somebody who could get the humor without turning it into a comedy and who could get the horror in a realistic way, but still have it, kind of tinged with that melancholy that gives it some realism and gives it, gives the characters a little more humanity. I think he was in a unique position at that time to be able to make that movie what it is.
Yeah, and not only the first movie, which I agree with everything that you've said, but for me, like my way of seeing Scream and the way I look at it is like I see Scream as like the original being like so driven by that screenplay, and like that's kind of where people's attention goes. But after Scream 1, as it pertains to like Scream 2 and 3 in terms of the trilogy, and then Scream 4, which is a whole other can of worms, I really feel like Wes is the driving force of the sequels and the reason why we are so attached to the trio and the arcs of each of the characters, the arc of the story with Maureen Prescott, the themes that come across so vividly in Scream 4 about, pop culture. That is all Wes driving the ship in a way that like it's so prevalent to me that like without him, Gale and Dewey would not be who they are. Even Sidney Prescott wouldn't have had the closure she did and the type of development that she did by the time we get to Scream 3 and 4.
I think he definitely had more input on the stories for the later films. I think he even said, the first one was kind of there on the page, and then he got to develop the sequels. I mean, there were a lot of people, because the first one was such a big hit, there's a lot of people kind of jockeying for, to kind of get their 2 cents in there, which I'm sure there's other books that have gone into that, and you've gone into that on your show, and there's a lot there that I didn't go into in the book because I was trying to keep it focused on Wes. But I think something like Wes noticing and caring about the relationship that sprung up between Courtney Cox and David Arquette, and going, there's just such a magical thing there that it has to get kind of baked into the story, and caring, and even off screen caring about the relationship so much that David Arquette talks about him pulling him aside and saying, listen, you guys are good together and you need to sort of man up, because don't screw this up. I mean, just that, again, that sort of paternalistic quality that he had, I think he brings to the storytelling. And yeah, you definitely see that as those characters kind of grow and change in 2 and 3 and beyond.
Well, there's a beautiful quote towards the end when it's involving Scream 4, and it's more like a set of quotes where he's talking about the trio and like how they grow and develop and branch off into different unique ways, and that they're extremely human, and that's what kind of separates Scream from other slashers and other slasher franchises. And that to me, it just made me realize I feel like he understands what a lot of fans like me and people who listen to this show, why we love Scream so much. And like he understands that key difference of focusing on Sydney and Gale and Dewey, how that made the difference for us as fans compared to fans of, say, Friday the 13th. It's just with Scream, having the same director, the same actors, the same characters, and growing over the years. Like that is something that is irreplaceable for Scream fans. And that's why a lot of us are so obsessed with it.
Yeah. And why we're so hopeful about the next movie, I think. I think it was just in a recent interview that Nev Campbell was kind of talking about the Sam Carpenter character and sort of made a comment that Wes would not have liked that character's darkness. Is that?
Well, she didn't say Wes did. What she said was that she, because in Scream 5 and in Scream 6, both of those films end with Sam becoming more and more dark and violent, and the film kind of like celebrating this dark aspect of her personality as she's carrying out the killing of the killers. But what Nev kind of said was that she was on the set for Scream 5 watching this all go down, and first, she told Radio Silence that they were kind of losing her in the way that the finale was going down. If they're losing her, they're losing the audience. So one, but then two, she further said like that Sam's darkness didn't feel like Scream to her. Like what she was seeing didn't feel like the Scream she was living in, which was namely Wes Craven's. So that's she didn't specifically say anything like, oh, Wes wouldn't have liked this, but her experience was making the movies with Wes wasn't what she was experiencing now.
Yeah, I think Wes, I think it's partly because he started out with a film like Last House on the Left, which is so brutal. And then, by the time he got to, A Nightmare on Elm Street, he was in a very different place and felt like, I don't want to say felt like it was necessarily like a moral responsibility, but he didn't want, it was very important for him to him that, Nancy in A Nightmare on Elm Street would kind of overcome Freddy, but without just sort of like resorting to violence and perpetuating a cycle of violence. And this was like, this whole cycle of violence theme was really important, to Wes. I mean, like the early films it just goes round and round and round. The killers, the victims kill the person who's trying to kill them. And, it just never ends. And it was like, how do you end the cycle of violence? I think was so important to him. Now, obviously, Sydney is killing people at the end of the Scream movies. I mean, you're not going, but it's not sort of in a vengeful, vindictive, overkill kind of way. And I would imagine that probably that's sort of what Nev Campbell looks at and goes, well, that's going further. It's a different scenario there. To sort of indulge your darkest demons is different from going, putting a wild animal out of their misery kind of thing.
Well, so to quote your book, page 327.
Quoted to myself, that's dangerous.
But no, just to prove Nev's point, and I guess to back her up here, is maybe, I think she is right here. So Wes said that, talking about Scream 3 at the end, it's about moving beyond the heritage of your own house and your own parents. It's about the limitations of revenge and the difficulty of confronting evil and violence without becoming evil and violent yourself. Whew. So, and that is kind of the contra of Scream 5 and 6, what they were doing with Sam. So, I mean, I guess Nev is right there in Wes's own words. So that's very interesting to me. But there's a quote in your book about in the New Nightmare era of the book where Wes talks about Nancy becoming a mother. Everything that he says about Nancy being a mother in New Nightmare can apply to Nev Campbell and Sidney Prescott in Scream 7, because that is that's the story of Scream now going forward, henceforth, exploring Sidney Prescott as a mother. So
I had a great conveation with Heather about New Nightmare. And
surprising too, like she surprised me. The quote about Wes didn't take some of her feelings into consideration. I was like really surprised by that.
Yeah, well,
I had to reread that. I was like, what?
Well, I think it's, because, I mean, obviously he built kind of that whole story around her, not just her in that role, but some things she'd gone through in her life, that she had a stalker. She was a mother. She had some misgivings about having, I don't think she had any regrets or misgivings about having been in Nightmare on Elm Street or having been in horror movies in general, but it, caused problems for her and for, especially for her family. You don't want your family to be vulnerable. And so, I think a lot of the conversations that they had when they were developing New Nightmare were about, you need to distance the fake Heather Langenkamp a little bit more from the real Heather Langenkamp. And so, because she's using her name, it's her name in the film. She's playing, Heather Langenkamp, but it's not, but it's a different version of herself. And it's a version of herself that's a little more kind of unhinged than the real Heather Langenkamp is. It's sort of hit on this note of, that she had some mental illness in her family, and Heather went, whoa, 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 whoa. Like my family, like my mother's alive. She's going to see this movie. We can't, because it was specific, I think, in the original script that my mother was institutionalized. And Heather's like, I will not say that. I'm not saying that on screen. That's not going to, so she ended up and he wouldn't change it. And I think the reason he wouldn't change it, and if you've read the book, you know that Wes had some mother issues. His mother was a piece of work. And I think there's a little bit of a dig there in that, at his own mother. And so it was important to him for it to be in the movie. And he wasn't, I think you're right. He probably wasn't being as considerate as he should have been over the fact that, this is Heather using the name Heather Langenkamp in this movie. She's it's a fictional version of herself, and you have to be, a little more considerate of the fact that you're using her real name.
It's so interesting that Wes did this somewhat with New Nightmare in a different way, but that this is the path we're going down for Scream. And I think that it's natural and right. And, I have no evidence for this, of course, but I think if Wes Craven were making Scream, if he was coming back to do a Scream reboot in today's world, I think this is the story he probably would have wanted all along. I think he was attached to Sidney and preserving that legacy. And I think that he would have wanted to see, see Nev Campbell be the star, of a movie like this in today's world.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think even to have it focus a lot on her as a kind of a protector of her child, of the next generation. I mean, I think about this a lot lately. Actually, I'm a much older guy than I was when I was first writing about these Scream movies, and your priorities change. And I'm always thinking about lately about, I have an 11-year-old daughter, and and I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to feel like, it's her world and I'm just living in it.
Okay.
And I feel like that's maybe kind of where Sidney Prescott, would be at a certain, because you become so much about protecting your child at any cost, and protecting, kind of turning over the world, to the next generation in a way, and making it as good as it can be for them. And I think that was something that was really important to Wes. I mean, I think that's why he was still in his later years making films about teenagers.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's their world and I'm just living in it.
I love that. That makes total sense. And just imagine that as applied to Sidney Prescott, where with all of the baggage that she has, and probably what she's hidden from her family, or hidden from her daughter, to protect her and give her the most normal life possible, and then confronting this thing that's inevitable. It's so great. So I have to ask, okay, as it pertains to Wes Craven, are you more of a Scream guy or a Nightmare guy?
Well, you're not going to like my answer to that.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. Go for it. I figured it was Nightmare.
Yeah, it's Nightmare because I mean, I think it's generational. I think I was more impressionable when I saw the Nightmare movies. Although, yeah, I'm a sucker for that whole sort of rubber reality subgenre that came out of Nightmare on Elm Street, where people were fusing kind of slasher movie sensibilities with European art house cinema. Just they were so abstract, they were so imaginative, so inventive. So I'm a sucker for that type of horror film of the kind of the late 80s, that whole era. But Scream, the first Scream came out, I was a senior in high school when the first Scream came out. And I was because I was one of these horror geeks, I was there every Friday or Saturday for whatever new horror movie was coming out. And other than my best friend, Ben, I was always going to these things alone, because it was the era of, The Mangler and Hellraiser 4 and Halloween 6 and John Carpenter's Village of the Damned and some really kind of crappy horror movies. And so people didn't go, and I went and saw Scream, and, at the first show, and was like, oh my God, I can bring everybody to this. Everybody will love this. Mm-hmm. And it was such a great, the second night, it was such a great, communal experience where everybody I knew, especially the people who didn't care about horror movies or didn't usually watch horror movies, loved Scream. There was that communal, almost kind of a familial quality to Scream that horror movies hadn't had in a while. So yeah, I was really invested in that Scream trilogy for those reasons, because it felt like sort of, for people our age, it was our series. And then, sadly, by the time 4 and 5 and 6 came out, I was kind of no, this is not really my Scream anymore. So 5 and 6 are just a blur for me. I've seen them once, and it's all right.
Well, I mean, I'm not so hot on Scream 6 myself, and Scream 5, I appreciate it it at the time. But it is what it is. My hope for you is that Kevin Williamson is able to capture something similar to what Wes would have done in the 90s with the original trilogy, with Scream 7. And from what I've been told, what I've heard about the movie, he does that. And I think that like there could be like a return to the franchise for you, I think.
Yeah, I'm excited. I will be there probably on opening day for the new one, and I haven't been for the last two, so we'll see.
So I have a question to follow up that. So the Scream trilogy comes and goes. Scream 4, you kind of just alluded to that. You didn't really connect with it as much. Can you expand on that? And what are your thoughts on it as Wes's final film and final statement?
I mean, I don't know that there's a whole, expanding on it is really just acknowledging that I am old. It was like the kind of the moment where I was going to get super excited about it. It's, there was a period like, I'm in my 40s now, and there was like a time in my 30s where I wasn't listening to a lot of new music. I wasn't trying to find new music, and which was ridiculous because I had been obsessed with music and obsessed with movies, and I wasn't going to the movies as much. I wasn't looking for new music, and then it sort of came back around. But yeah, I think when Scream 4 came out, I was just in a place where I just wasn't as kind of excitable. I was trying to figure out, different parts of how to live my life, I guess. So as Wes's last film, when I interviewed him, like I said, he invited me to lunch, and I remember sitting in the restaurant, and we were talking about My Soul to Take, which at that time had not come out. I was like sitting in a vault at Universal, and he didn't know if it was ever going to come out. Some big changes at Universal, and there was a new regime had come in, and they weren't the ones that greenlit the movie, and they didn't care about it. But
he was passionate about that movie.
Really, he was. Passionate. We talked about it quite. I mean, he was really, he I think the reason that we were talking about it, maybe the reason he sort of scheduled the lunch for that day, was because he had just found out that he was going to be doing Scream 4. And in fact, there was like a notary came around to our table while we were sitting there having lunch, and he signed the contracts for Scream 4 while I was sitting at the table having lunch with him.
Right now. Oh my God.
So he was, I think he knew, I think until that moment, he was a little bit afraid that like My Soul to Take might be kind of the end of the career for him, because, the cliche is you're only as good as your last movie. And, what's worse than a movie that comes out and underperforms is a movie that doesn't come out at all.
Right.
Because people make their own assumptions. So it must have been really bad if they didn't even put it out. And and then it came out, and I was like, I was one of the 3 people who saw My Soul to Take in the theater. And that's definitely a mixed bag too, that movie. And then Scream 4, was supposed to kick off a new trilogy and didn't. So I mean, I think, in terms of like his career, I mean, commercially they kind of sunk him. So it's it's sort of hard for me to look at either of those as anything except a little bit of a sour note.
Yeah.
To end on. I'm really fascinated actually by My Soul to Take, and I wish that he had written it as a novel, and that maybe it could have then become a series. I mean, now it would be a series. Like it would be like a series of episodes where each episode focuses on a different character, and it would have some breathing room. I think there was potential for something there that would have been really great from Wes.
Well, I'll tell you, I did not like My Soul to Take, and I've tried watching it twice, and it's been hard for me to get through, and I haven't tried watching in a good 10 years. Your book and how you describe what Wes wanted to do with this movie, it inspires me to go back and watch, so I am going to try. So I want to get your official ranking here for the Scream movies. I'm guessing it's release order. Logical.
Yeah, that's boring, but yeah, I mean, that's, and I think that's just sort of, it's experiential, it's emotional attachment. I was not a fan of Scream 3 when it first came out, and that's one that I've kind of come around to. In fact, I would say that every time I watch it, I like it a little bit more. The delivery, like the acting, the wittiness is so sharp. It's just so sharp. I think it's much sharper than the first 2 movies, in fact. And I think when I first saw it, I thought, oh, this isn't as much of a horror movie as I want it to be. But it's a really, I think it actually has more chops in terms of its storytelling, and maybe even in terms of the acting than the first movies.
I think, and not only the comedy, but I also want to just give Scream 3 its flowers for the drama. All of Neve Campbell's performance in Scream 3 is complete drama, and it's beautiful. But the storytelling, like you're saying, like the going into Maureen Prescott's backstory, first of all, just as like a story device to tie back to the original and really create this like unit, brilliant. But like also just the photographs with the messages on the back, like that's such rich storytelling. And I think there's a lot of Wes in the storytelling of Scream 3. What is your preferred Nancy Nightmare sequel? New Nightmare or Dream Warriors?
I mean, Dream Warriors is more fun. New Nightmare is more ambitious. I mean, probably the one at this point that I would, if I were going to, put one in right now, watch it, it would be Dream Warriors. I think, yeah, that one's more fun to me.
As somebody who knows Wes Craven inside and out and wrote this really wonderful book that I really love, it's one of my favorite books that I've read in recent years. But what could Scream 7 do to feel like it's really capturing that spirit of Wes Craven again?
I mean, I think it's those three characters. I mean, obviously they killed off Dewey. It's pretty tough to kind of rebound from that, but it does seem like they're going to try to do something to get David Arquette into the film. There's a part of me that doesn't want to speculate about what it's going to be and doesn't, wants to kind of go in not knowing anything and just be surprised. So I'm really not thinking about it that much in terms of story and what I might want from story, except to say that, even talking about Scream 3, I think some of what works about Scream 3 is just going, all right, it's not just kind of about the jump scares and we're going to break formula a little bit and we're going to try some different things. I think that would work for me. Just trying to do different things with these characters to show that they're in different places in their lives and they're going to respond to different things and respond to things in different ways. Illustrate that, as we get older, our reactions to these things change and our priorities change, and to let the characters be human. I think that's the bottom line. I think that's what Wes would have wanted.
Well, and is there one thing that you want people to know about the Soul of Wes Craven? Which I love the title, by the way, because you really do capture the soul of Wes Craven.
I was talking to somebody last year who loved the book and was praising the book and was saying, do you know what you've kind of done for Wes and his legacy? That you've gotten all of these things out there that wouldn't have been out there otherwise. And my response to him was a little bit cheeky, but I said, yeah, well, it doesn't really matter. People don't read the book. So, all I can really say, and this just sounds like a shameless plug, and it kind of is, but if you care about Wes, read the book, because, all the stuff that ends up sort of in pop culture about him, that ends up on the internet, that people talk about on podcasts, anywhere else, I want some of these sort of the new information and the secrets about Wes and the things that he said, the way he thought about things, to kind of sort of penetrate all the material that's on the internet, because a lot of it's sort of old and inaccurate stuff. And, I just would like to see Wes get, a fair shake as a person, for people to know him a little bit better.
Well, it's not a shameless plug. I agree with you. I think if you're a fan of Wes Craven, or you've been inspired by him in any shape, way, or form, that this book is a necessary read. You'll come out feeling closer to him and understanding and respecting the ups and downs of his career that we take for granted, I think. One final question, like one last addendum here. Who is your favorite person to speak to about the book? I am partial to Marianne Madalena. I know her. I think she is lovely.
Yeah, I think my answer is probably going to be the very first person that I reached out to and cold called for this, which is a woman named Mary Bloxma, who went to Wheaton and also Johns Hopkins with Wes, and knew him in both places, and they knew each other. And for years after that, stayed in touch for many, many years. She really kind of helped me get to know sort of the literary side of Wes, and also just to get to know what he was like as a younger person. I mean, I interviewed quite a few people who went to college with him, but Mary was sort of the gateway to a lot of those people. She was the first person that I tracked down and talked to, and she actually was the only person that I interviewed when the manuscript was done, I asked her to read the manuscript.
Wow.
Well, not the only person, but she was the only person who read the manuscript and gave me copy edit notes.
Okay.
So, which is always for an author very, very helpful. So I'm very grateful to Mary Bloxma for doing that.
Awesome. Well, again, Joseph Maddrey, thank you so much. And please, everybody, seek out The Soul of Wes Craven.
Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next segment of Scream with Ryan C. Showers. I'm sitting here with Josh Calamari.
Hi, honey. How are you?
Good, honey. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
So, Josh, one of your favorite Scream movies, of course, is Scream 5. So I want to go further than that, because with Scream 5, it was the beginning of a new version of Scream. So, and I'm kind of with you. I like Scream 5. For me, I really don't like Scream 6 in terms of the evolution. I know you are also not a Scream 6 fan, but unfortunately, it is the era that we are in. And Scream 7 is it's another chapter in that era, or it's a new version of the era, since Radio Silence started it, and now Kevin Williamson gets to take it over. two of the people to come out of Scream 5, Gale and Mindy, are your favorite characters of the respective groups. So, like, Gale is your favorite member of the trio, and Mindy is your favorite member of the core four. Is that correct?
100%.
So on Friday, everybody, you're going to hear an episode that we recorded. Josh came to it. We recorded a big group Zoom about what we want to see from Sidney Prescott in Scream 7. And that is great and fine and all. Nev deserves it. Sidney deserves it, getting to be the main character again. But, we do have three other survivors returning in Scream 7. They are Gale, Chad, and Mindy. So I thought this would be a really cool opportunity to get everybody warmed up and just kind of talk about those three in terms of what we could expect from them in Scream 7. So, and it's interesting because, Chad and Mindy are without Sam and Tara. This is the first time. And it's hard because, like, in Scream 5, I don't know about you, but, like, I never felt like Mindy was so connected. Either of them were connected to Sam and Tara in a certain way. For me, what the thing I remember most about Mindy is just her as, like, an independent figure. Her on the couch by herself. She was not supporting Sam in the ending. I just want to start out with, like, why is Mindy your favorite?
In Scream 5,
Yeah.
she was a queer woman of color who was smart, who knew her shit and didn't take shit. As a gay man who was raised by a single mother and has a lot of strong female influences in my life, I've always been, whether it's a horror movie, a drama, a comedy, I've always been attracted to this strong female character.
One of my friends, Carrie Tenney, she went to a convention in August and she got Jasmine Savoy's autograph from me. It's the picture of Mindy holding the knife on the Scream 6 poster. And Jasmine wrote this really nice message to me. She said, "Happy 30th birthday." And she said, "I'm going to listen to your podcast." So what went wrong from Mindy in 5 to Mindy in 6 for you?
Honey, I I don't think you have enough hours in the day. That movie was a total dumpster fire. They had this really good character that was smart, wrong. Once again, she knew her shit. She was like a relative of a legacy character. She was smart, funny, like all of that stuff that you look for. And then in 6, she just became this caricature. Like,
Yeah.
I was so disappointed. And then, like, her lover falls off that ladder and she's not even upset.
Not even lastingly upset. Like, she's a little bit upset at first, and then there's no follow through. I don't even think they mention Annika after, after that first scene when she's sitting in the ambulance. Like, throughout the rest of the movie, the girlfriend isn't mentioned once. And it's just disappointing. It makes her less human. It makes her less three-dimensional. It makes her, like you said, more of a caricature. And then when you add in all of the jokes and the comedy and just, like, it just feels over the top. And speaking of that, we mentioned before that Gale is your favorite character of the trio.
Yes, honey, yes.
And there's been such an emphasis on, like, Nev Campbell returning to Scream. So Nev has been getting extra attention recently
Oh,
because it's her time after not being in 6, which in retrospect is probably a good thing, right? But Courtney, in my opinion, there's so much ground to make up for because of how they treated Gale in Scream 6. And I think Gale is fantastic in Scream 5. I think that Scream 5 is one of her best outings. I think Courtney's acting is so strong and emotional and confident. I feel like I was watching Gale Weathers, where in Scream 6, I don't feel like I'm watching Gale Weathers. I see it in the big phone call, but otherwise I don't feel like that was Gale. What are your thoughts?
you did a podcast with two cute boys. I think they're straight. I think one of them likes Scream 6.
Yes.
Honey, I don't know you. I've never met you. You seem like a cute boy. That's your choice, honey. More power to you. In fact, honey, I would love to talk to you and understand why you like that. Listen, Gale in Scream 5, Gale is the apex predator. She's the apex actress. She is everything. That I can't. Someone who loves Sydney, and like I said, I think Sydney, she's fine, honey, but she's always serious and she's always in trauma and she's always this. But when her and Gale come together, it like
Yeah.
everything. That is why I like Scream 5 so much. And I don't understand, everyone in this podcast probably knows more about me than Scream, but Gale's evolution into
Mhm.
Scream 5 is the perfect. You can't, yes, she has a good chase scene in 2, yes, but in every movie, she fucking doesn't make it to the end. She's either gets shot or maimed and then comes back. But this one, she's there and she's like right in. And like I said, what I like about Scream 5 is they use the legacy characters how they were supposed to be at first. I loved her scenes. I loved, loved, loved. Tremendous acting. Tremendous. Give her best supporting actress.
Well, I agree with you. And like, there is what you just said there about Gale always kind of like coming up to the edge of the finale, but never really going there. In Scream 5, she gets to kill Amber. She gets to
Yes,
be the
honey.
one who, and that's such a triumphant moment for her. The way that Sydney hands the gun to her and then Gale gets to actually shoot her and then she sets on fire. Like there's something so heroic in that. There's something like that maybe like we were building to this moment over 1, 2, 3, 4, and finally in 5. It's there. Again, like the Gale in Scream 5, I feel like is the same Gale that evolved from 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's perfect. And I really hope that we get that Gale back. I don't want to see her disappear again like she did in Scream 6.
Yeah, but you know what, honey? With Scream 5, it was Gale's movie. Out
It
of the
was.
legacy characters in it, honey, like I said, I'm not trying to, I got a boner to pick about this because everyone says Sydney wasn't that big or Sydney was supporting character. Yeah, she was. Honey, Scream 5 was Gale's. She literally said, I'm not going to do this. This is your kill. We're sisters. It's you. That is what she was meant for. They left a perfectly beautiful, good legacy character who was through the 5 movies was going her honey, they literally left her on the floor like a piece of garbage.
And there was so much momentum of Gale coming out of Scream 5 into Scream 6. They set it up so perfectly. It was going to be it was in New York. It was her home turf, where her show is. After losing Dewey and getting that moment to kill Amber, she was set up so well for a sequel. And that's the part that's most painful for me is like people who act like, "Oh, this was such a great thing for Gale because she finally got a big scene like that." Well, yeah, she's had scenes like that the entire franchise, so fuck you. But second of all, you're discounting what came before and how she was set up and how she was put in the place to do so much in Scream 6, and they did nothing with her. And let me tell you something. I have not talked about this on air, but I'm going to. Do you know the website Bloody Disgusting? It's like a big horror website.
I've heard of it, honey.
Well, so I'm like not the biggest fan of Bloody Disgusting, and I'll tell you what, the Scream 6 review, it's so fishy. First of all, the review itself, it was a glowing review. It felt corporatized. It felt disingenuous. It was like a 5 out of 5 review, and it was higher than what they gave Scream 5 the year before. But there was something fishy about it. And here's what's even weirder, okay? This woman, she's the film critic at Bloody Disgusting. Her name's Megan Navarro. She wrote the review for Scream 6. And she listed every single member of the cast down to Samara Weaving and the actress who plays Annika, Devin, whatever her last name is. Every single character was referenced in her review except for Gale Weathers and Courtney Cox. She didn't mention Courtney Cox or Gale Weathers once in her review. And to me, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I don't think that was an accident. I don't think that was a mistake. I don't think that was a typo. I don't think that was an oversight. I think that was strategic. I think it was calculated. I think she was intentionally left out of the review. And it makes my blood boil as a longtime Scream fan. It makes my blood boil as a Scream 5 fan that where Gale was the MVP of that movie, that she would then, not even be mentioned in the Scream 6 review. It makes my blood boil that Nev Campbell isn't in this movie. David Arquette isn't in this movie. Courtney Cox is the only person in this movie, and she isn't mentioned in the review. And first of all, she's the biggest star of that movie. At the time it came out, Wednesday, it had just come out. So she was still bigger than Jenna Ortega. And secondly, Gale's phone call was in the trailer so heavily. She was in the marketing materials so heavily. Her chase scene was in the marketing materials so heavily. And Megan Navarro specifically did not mention Courtney Cox in her review. I feel like it was intentional. Like, ooh, we don't need to mention Courtney Cox because she's older. We need to make way for all of these new characters. We need to push this instead of honoring the part of the legacy. It feeds into the worst stereotypes about Hollywood, not respecting women over a certain age, which Courtney Cox falls into. And, worse than that, I think it's just plain unprofessional. When you have somebody who has been in all 6 movies and Bloody Disgusting, you need to do better. And so this leads into my next point. So over the last weekend, Entertainment Weekly reported that Hayden Panettiere, there's like an article about Hayden Panettiere, and they referenced that she was in Scream 4 and Scream 6, and that she would be joining Nev Campbell in Scream 7, or starring along Nev Campbell in Scream 7. That has not been reported. She was not on set. The way that it's written and the prose of it, like the actual sentence, it felt like a mistake. It felt like there was like a journalist who was just making an assumption that, that wasn't a fully checked out piece of news. I tweeted and I posted and I said, I think this was a mistake, an innocent mistake. Everybody, all of the clickbait YouTubers took this and ran with it as though this was confirmed just to get likes and retweets and views and whatever else. And what's worse of all is Bloody Disgusting is supposed to be, this objective, hard-hitting journalism website. They reported on this. They acted as though this was a confirmed thing. And I found it to be unprofessional because it's like if you are an establishment journalism, whatever, in the horror world, and you don't do your independent fact checking and you post this, again, promulgating this rumor that wasn't confirmed by anybody, that was a mistake by some staff writer at Entertainment Weekly. Are you fucking kidding me? How unprofessional are you to be peddling rumors? You are no better than the stupid YouTubers that push these lies to begin with just to get views on their videos. And then the best part was Entertainment Weekly issued a correction saying that this was not the case. Then, of course, Bloody Disgusting had to issue its correction. But the point of the matter is, journalists are supposed to do their independent research that's separate from reporting clickbait bullshit. And I just think we all need to look at Megan Navarro's review of Scream 6, where she didn't mention Courtney Cox. Look at the way that they used clickbait to report on Hayden Panettiere being in Scream 7. She's not in Scream 7. Look at that and be like, really? This is the best we have to work with?
Honey, it's all a bunch of bullshit until it comes out of someone else's mouth. I don't even know why people pay attention to that shit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so, and here's the thing about Kirby in Scream 6. So they took the Kirby that we knew in Scream 4, and they turned her into an FBI agent in Scream 6. And that was the way that the writers made her fit into the puzzle. And this kind of leads into Gale and Mindy and Chad. Because, Gale, I feel like the way that Guy Busick and Jamie Vanderbilt wrote these new Scream movies is we can only have the legacy characters in the movie if they have a job. So Gale is the reporter, and that's how she can be in a Scream movie, because she's reporting on it. That's her only way to be in a Scream movie. And Kirby can only be in a Scream movie because she's an FBI agent who's on the case. So now the rumor mill is, and it's more than a rumor, I mean, it's pretty much confirmed at this point that Chad and Mindy in Scream 7 are going to be working for Gale. Like Mindy's going to be her producer and Chad's going to be her cameraman. And again, Guy Busick can't help. Give the legacy characters and the survivors a job. I don't know. I have very conflicting feelings here. So
I could give a flying fuck. Like, I want to see Gale be able to mourn fucking Dewey. I don't care. We know she's a reporter.
Yeah.
That's great. I think that Kelly Ripa's husband is going to be a reporter. That's fine, but there's so much more. When you have a shitstorm of Scream 6 and you literally leave your goddess on the ground dead, you can only go up, 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 up. That's what I want for Gale. I want it up, 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 up. I want to see her have a relationship with Sydney and like maybe hang out with their kids. But I told you, I'm like, I'd love to see Sydney and Gale go to a bar and have a few cocktails and dance and like have fun. I'd like to see Mindy and Chad explore being twins. Like hopefully they're both single and, ready to mingle and have some fun. Like I want Scream 7 to have some fun in it, honey. Like it's always doom and gloom and like I said, honey, I loved Mindy in Scream 5. She's one of my favorites, but you can only go up. Like it was embarrassing as a Mindy lover, how Mindy is right now with not knowing what she is. It's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment. And us Mindy shippers have to, we have to take it. We have to take it for the team.
But here's the thing. What you're saying is true. Like, I want to see Chad and Mindy for who they are themselves. I don't want to just see Mindy just in the role of Gale's assistant. Like, I want to see her and Chad talk and see what they're actually like as twins without Sam and Tara. I think that's really important. I want to see their personality. I want to see Gale's personality. Well, so you mentioned the fact of like both Chad and Mindy as single. So Chad and Tara, again, they were forcing this, love story on us too, because they needed a new Gale and Dewey. And instead of just doing something original, but like, so Chad is in this movie, Tara is not. I'm assuming that they're broken up. Would you like to see them broken up, or do you want to see Chad, I guess, doing long distance with Tara?
Honey, I don't like Sam and Tara, honey. That chick, the one is a bad actress. And the other one, the shorter one, the Wednesday chick, what was her name again?
Jenna Ortega.
Yeah, honey, she phoned it in Scream 6.
Yeah.
She had a bit of success, and she phoned it in Scream 6. Big time. She wasn't interested. She didn't want to be there. I don't care. Sayonara, girl. Sayonara. Like, let's have Chad having fun. I want to see him interact with. He never interacted with Sydney at all, right?
Never.
See them. I want to see those two interact. I just wanted to have a bit of fun, honey. I wanted to have a bit of fun.
I feel like I understand why you love Mindy now so much is because she is the fun. She can bring the fun, and I want to see. I think that that's actually that could be an important part for her in Scream 7 is to bring the fun. And similar to like the way that Parker Posey and Jennifer and Gale played off of each other in Scream 3. Listen, so basically, I think that everybody out there, we need to brace for the fact that there's going to be a little friendship group here with Gale and Chad and Mindy. They're going to have a couple of scenes together because of the nature of them working together, or Chad and Mindy working for Gale. So I think that that's actually. I mean, Sydney and Gale are going to get a lot of scenes together. Chad and Mindy will get scenes with Sydney as well. But I think like we have to talk about Gale, Chad, and Mindy as a unit because it's coming. And honestly, if all four of them survive, I think that this is a unit that we're going to see go into Scream 8 and 9 probably just because of the nature of it. So, I actually think that Mindy going into media based off of how much she loves movies makes a lot of sense. I don't know about Chad being the cameraman. I don't know how much sense that makes. Why would he, I don't know. But, the good thing about this is there's, because Mindy is fun, and comedy, and Chad can kind of play off of that, and Gale can certainly play off that. Imagine Gale Weathers and Mindy working together, and imagine Chad trying to be the person in the middle, right? Where Gale is annoyed with Mindy because of her BS, and Mindy is annoyed with Gale because she sees her as an old woman who's kind of out of touch, blah, blah, blah. And Chad is kind of the person in the middle trying to manage these two sides and personalities. Like, that could be a lot of fun.
Yes, it's the comedy duo that is needed in 2026. And it
Go ahead.
comes out of my birthday weekend, and that's my birthday wish.
And Courtney Cox, her roots, despite like the Gale of it all, her roots are in comedy. So I think like Mindy and Chad, they can almost fill the role of like the Gale sidekick that we saw with Jennifer in Scream 3, and in a really cool way. And I think that there could be a nice balance between them. There could be some surprises in their conversations. I don't know. I can see Gale and Chad getting along really well. I can see Mindy challenging Gale with really good and creative ideas, like as it pertains to the job and the work and whatever else, and Ghostface. And I can see Gale pushing forward and leading, but it will be a fun group to see interact. I don't know.
I just want this story to move forward. Everyone keeps talking about Scream 8 and 9. Let's get through 7. Let's just be happy with what we have right now and enjoy this time because this is the fun time. The
Yeah.
October, November, December, January, we all get to like, oh, I wonder what's going on, and the suspense and the trailer comes out. Because when it comes February 28th, it's different. Can I ask you one question? I hear it brought up a lot. Should Dewey have died? Yes or no?
It's complicated.
Not
See,
really.
no, so at the time I would have said it was the right decision, but in retrospect now, it's hard. I say I don't know. It's complicated because of just I don't know. I mean, I love what it did for the story. I love that it made it so dramatic, and I love what it brought out in Gale and Sydney. I love that it felt forward moving, but then Scream 6 does nothing with Gale's grief. It does nothing with how she changes from, Scream 5 to Scream 6. So I don't know. And there is a part of me that's sad that David doesn't get to be a part of this movie in the same way as Courtney. You know what I mean? I don't know. What are your thoughts, Josh?
Should have died 100%.
Okay.
And I will die on this sword. Listen, this is where you and me may have a bit of debate, but I think Sydney is the strongest in Scream 5. And as a Scream lover, present this to you.
Yeah.
Why else would she have come back into this story? Like, her evolution in Scream 5 is exactly how her character should be. She's done, she's moved on. The only thing that would bring her back is the death of either Dewey or Gale. And
Yeah.
let's be honest, out of those two, Gale is the superior character. And it pushes forward Gale's story. And I agree with you. That is one of the things I will never understand. I felt like Scream 6, they just phoned it all in. And that is the thing with Kevin and Courtney and Nev. They will not phone it in.
Yeah.
Scream 6 is nothing but everyone phoning it in. Melissa's bad acting, Jenna not giving a fuck, Mindy being degraded, Chad surviving 18 stab wounds to the head and still being like functional.
Yeah.
It's the way they used and abused Samara Weaving. Like,
Yeah.
what the fuck was that?
Again, so I agree with you. And so if you look at Scream 5, just the structure of it. So I think that the reason why people have beef is that Dewey died in a movie where Sam was the main character. I think that was part of the problem. I think that people didn't like that they made him into a drunk and they depicted him as such a sad person and that they killed him off at his lowest point.
What he was, though. That's what
Yeah.
he was. That was his evolution. He's got fired. He divorced his wife. Like, he was a sad person. That's what I don't understand is that, like, from our legacy characters, that's what we want. Like, that's what he was. He's not going to be happen down, the yellow brick road.
No, I agree. So other people would say that he shouldn't have died. Some people will say that he could have died, just not in that way, that he could have died. Like, let's just say he gets to the finale and he gets killed at the house, protecting Gale as opposed to protecting Sam and Tara. I think that's a big one too, is that he dies protecting these two, someone he literally just met, as opposed to, Sydney and Gale, and not being with them in that finale. But like the beautiful thing is,
Ooh, honey, that was the gay gasp. I've never thought about that until now. Oh my God, you are freaking me the fuck out.
but yeah, just imagine, like, for instance, let's just say Sydney does come back for another reason. Like, so I think like you could have, I agree with you. Sydney coming back to Woodsboro because her big brother died. That is an ironclad reason for her to come back. Okay. My beef with that is like I wish we would have been able to see Sydney react to the news of Dewey's death. I think that Ghostface should have called Sydney after Dewey died, as opposed to Sydney just showing up at the hospital. If they would have had that scene, I would agree with you about Sydney and Scream 5, 100%. But without that scene, I'm a little skeptical. But in terms of, like, just imagine this. Let's just say Sydney she starts to feel guilty, like she needs to go back and help because Gale and Dewey are there, and she just if it starts eating away at her, and then she just chooses to go back because they're there. Let's just say all three of them are at that house. Imagine like Gale and Dewey in the bushes outside the house, arguing and bickering with each other, and like some resolution and happiness that they can come to after reuniting and after their ugly divorce, right? And then he gets killed. It would be so emotional. So I think that like there are different things you could have done to have the same effect, but regardless, it stands that killing Dewey as a way to bring Sydney back to town, unite Sydney and Gale, and give Gale this arc to avenge his death and kind of collide with Sam and Tara and form this big mosaic of the original meets the requel. It is beautiful in theory when you look at the structure of it.
Honey, you freaked my freak with that. I get it now. Like, listen, I still think he should be dead, but yeah, it would have been better with. Oh wow, I never thought about that. Because I can't stand Sam and Tara. God,
Well,
they are the worst.
and like,
That's
here's another
okay.
thing. Imagine Scream 5 where it was just about, like, let's just say Sydney was the main character again, and let's just say it was like, kind of like a Scream 3 where all three of them, Sydney, Gale, and Dewey, each had equal roles, that they were the three main characters again. And then Dewey dies with that. Again, brilliant in my opinion. So I think that it was just about the way it was done and just the fact that some people just don't like seeing him in that really sad way of being a drunk and like being at a low, and that he didn't even really get a real scene with Sydney. It was just a phone call. So I mean, there's many layers of things that people feel like they were robbed of with Dewey before he died.
Wow, that's a whole new thing. Now I have to sit back and think because I didn't think about it like that. Listen, I still like Scream 5. But yeah, and I do still think he should die because as a Gale lover, it definitely moves her on to 6, 7. And I
Yeah.
really hope that they deal with that. I really hope that they deal with that. And her grief and like moving on. And like if she's got a man, honey, remember when we thought it was Gale Harold?
I know. That was the best rumor ever. Yeah.
Honey, please, hopefully, listen, I'm contradicting myself. But the gay gods, please listen. If there's a Scream 8, bring Gale Harold in. Oh my God, honey, here I am going back and forth.
He would be a great killer too. I'm sorry, but he is a great actor. He's hot, he's sexy, and he can play darkness really, really well. We saw that. And so Gale Harold played Brian in Queer as Folk. He's an amazing actor. He's age appropriate for a Scream movie and a Scream killer. So it would be, and if let's just say he is fucking Gale, like that would be fun for someone who's attached to Gale to be under the mask. To wrap up, I have this kind of game that I want to play, as it pertains to our new group, our new trio in a way of Gale, Mindy, and Chad. So, I really think it's important for Gale, Mindy, and Chad to all be developed better than they were in Scream 6. I want especially Chad and Mindy to be developed as their own characters, separate from Sam and Tara. They need to stand as their own selves, not with the core four. I think the core four hurt Chad and Mindy so much as characters. And I think that like Scream 7 is their opportunity for them to, really show who they are and that they belong in this franchise, that they belong as survivors in this franchise. I think that Kevin can do it. Jasmine and Mason can do it. I'm excited to see what they can do. And I think that like this this opportunity of putting Gale with them, there's so many fun things that they could do with that, in terms of like comedy, in terms of the mystery and stuff. So I have some questions for us for a speed round. So Chad, Gale, and Mindy, of those three, which is most likely to fill in the blank? Okay, so which is most likely to guess the killer correctly?
Gale.
Yeah, I agree. Gale. Of Chad and Mindy, who do you think's more likely to?
Mindy.
Yeah, she needs the moment because she's gotten it wrong twice before. So, okay,
Yeah.
which is most likely to be killed?
Chad.
Okay. I think that, Jess Melendez also laid out a really good argument for Chad to die because he was the heart of Scream 6. So I'll say Chad as well. Okay. Which is most likely to take down the killer?
I would like to say in my fantasy, Gale and Mindy together.
I think it would be Gale because she already has taken down a killer, whereas Mindy and Chad have proven the way that they were written to not be able to on the subway or in the shrines. I say Gale. Which is most likely to sacrifice themselves for the greater good or for Sydney or another character?
Chad.
Yeah, Chad. Which of them is most likely to sacrifice themselves to get the story? Since they're all working as like a news entity, in journalism, which of them is most likely to sacrifice themselves for the story?
Mindy.
I think so too. I really do. I think Gale actually would put Sydney above the story. So I think that you're right. I think we're going to see a very curious Mindy in her developing her professional path, with this. So, which of the following is going to bring up Sam and Tara?
Is who cares one answer? I guess Chad.
Yeah,
Because
I guess
Mindy's
so.
just too good for that shit.
Yeah, Mindy's going to be like, who?
Exactly. The core what?
Exactly. So and last question, which of the following is most likely to leave the profession of journalism after the events of Scream 7?
Gale.
I think Chad. I think Chad's going to get in this and he's going to be like, this is too much for me. Well, Josh, thank you so much for coming on and having this little discussion about Gale and Mindy and Chad. Josh, thank you so much. Hey, Ash.
Hello, Ryan.
Is there anything going on this Friday? I think it's a pretty dead week. I don't know.
Not that I know of. What, you?
Wait, it's Nev Campbell's birthday. Wait, it's Mean Girls Day. The Aaron Samuels. Oh, it's October 3rd. Wait, Taylor Swift has a new album coming out.
My God, Team Conrad forever. I don't know why that happened because he's in Mean Girls, the musical.
Well, so for this segment, Ashley and I are going to be making our predictions for The Life of a Showgirl, which is Taylor Swift's 12th studio album. And we know nothing, basically. Well, actually, we literally just got news. We literally just got the news that there's going to be a movie released on October 3rd as well in the theaters with her music video for The Fate of Ophelia. And then the rest of the songs are going to also appear in the cinemas with just the lyrics. But so Ashley and I are going to be giving our predictions for the songs on the track list with The Life of the Showgirl. This will be a fun time capsule and just fun for people to anticipate, So Ash, is there anything right off the bat that you want to say about The Life of a Showgirl before we start going into some of the tracks?
I'm imagining a pretty pop forward album with lots of storytelling. And when you hear the lyrics, like you imagine what's happening. And I imagine pop beats with sad lyrics at some points. And then like some nice, more ballad, sad songs, but still having like a fun possible beat to them in some way is like what I'm imagining. Like 1989 meets Evermore is what I'm praying for. I'll be happy with whatever she gives us, but this is like the first time that I feel like this could beat 1989 for me, I think.
So, because the thing is, Taylor has emphasized that she wanted to make songs that were very catchy, that were more upbeat and more concise and tighter, based off of like the constructive criticism that she had for the Tortured Poets department. And she does this with all of her albums, really. If you look from like, Fearless to Speak Now, she did like the writing all of her songs. Speak Now to Red became much more broad and more pop. Right? Red to 1989, that was a huge change for her in terms of going from country, pop, rock, a bunch of different things to specifically pop. And it goes on and on and on. So the thing about this, though, and I agree with you, I'm so excited. I'm very interested in this album. The song titles, they feel very folk Evermore to me, more than they do fun, pop, upbeat. They're kind of sad, kind of very intellectual. If I was expecting the continuation from the Tortured Poets department and Midnights and Folk Evermore, it would be this star, The Fate of Ophelia, like, girl. So I wonder what it's going to be like.
Wasn't that great?
But, match though that with all of the amazing photographs we've gotten for this rollout. What are your favorite pictures? I have two.
The one where she's climbing over the seats because it
Mhm.
reminds me, which is like obviously a hint to the movie coming out.
Easter
So,
egg.
and it just reminds me of a spy. Like it reminds me of like this like sexy woman who's like having to be like a showgirl at like to like find like the bad guy or something. And then I like them all, but there's one where she's like in all silver
Yes.
and like I don't think she doesn't have anything like a headdress on or anything, and she's just like in all silver. But then I also love the one where she's looking in the mirror in the black bob.
Hmm. Yeah, well, that's probably the most different, right? Because we don't see her
Mhm.
traditional blonde hair. I am partial to the one where she's pushing the door shut. I just love that
Ooh,
pose.
yeah, TJ's favorite.
The one that TJ reshared
The one
on
that TJ
Instagram.
was like putting this as my background on my phone.
I like that one. But the one that is my absolute fave is one that she released basically the night of the podcast. It's the one with the diamonds, and she has like the little cap on, and one's covering her eye, and she has her finger in her mouth, and she's like,
Yeah,
that. I just feel like that is killer. Like no one has ever looked that good.
so pretty. I think it's really fun. I've heard a lot of people who like aren't huge Taylor fans talk about how they think the photo shoot was like so beautiful, and like they're not like haters, but they're just like, I'm actually excited for this because like the photos are so fun and different. I love how she changes her vibe every album. I am so excited for this album, and I agree that I think the track names like sound a little bit like they could be more in the like Evermore folklore vibe. But I feel like Midnights, like when you said Midnights, I feel like that might be a good idea. Like maybe it's Midnights, Evermore, folklore kind of mixed all together. I feel
Right.
like it's going to be very different from Tortured Poets
Yeah.
just because she just did that. And I feel like that was like a cathartic release. And this
Yeah.
feels like it's stuff she needed to express, but it feels a little bit lighter maybe for her. Whereas Tortured Poets felt pretty heavy.
And it's so fun because the song titles could go in many different ways. I mean, like, so once we hear them, it's going to make 1000% sense that it doesn't make now. So we're going to go through each of the songs. So we just learned that the first music video and the lead single of The Life of a Showgirl is going to be The Fate of Ophelia, which is track 1. So this has really interested me because it could go many different ways. Ophelia is a reference to the Ophelia in Hamlet, which is like kind of like the first showgirl in a way, if you think about it. So it's very fun that she would pick that and also pick it to discuss the fate of her, because her fate is she drowns in the river after being like a woman among men who didn't understand her or belittled her or whatever, and she drowns. And that's also kind of comes out in the album cover, right? Because she's in the bathtub. There's like an imagery similarity there. So I'm definitely very interested in this song just because there could be a big narrative aspect to it. She could be giving Ophelia a different ending, or she could be bringing out herself and what she's experienced in the industry through Ophelia. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Ash?
Yeah, I'm imagining that it would be teaching the fate of Ophelia through what she's experienced and hoping that she doesn't experience her fate is what I've imagined. Is like her being like, please don't let me have like the fate of Ophelia, but in a really pretty way. She won't say, please don't let me have the fate of Ophelia, guys. That's
Please
not
don't let
how
me
the song
drown.
goes. But I just imagined it being her almost like a continuation of the prophecy of, and then I think at the end it might be like, I'm not going to have the fate of Ophelia. I think she might flip it around being like, from going to like being her scared that it's going to happen, feeling like it is happening, to I will not allow this to happen to me.
Love that. Oh my gosh. We're chills. So next, we go from Ophelia in Hamlet to another showgirl, Elizabeth Taylor, from a way different era. So what are your thoughts here?
I could imagine this being like a parallel of the criticism for dating so many people. Or maybe it's just a really interesting, subtle nod to Sex and the City and Charlotte. Her dog's name's Elizabeth Taylor, if you didn't know. But I feel like it's going to be an admiration to different showgirls.
Yeah. Well,
clarify.
so I want to just cite the Swiftologist because I don't want to be plagiarizing him, which I do like the Swiftologist. He's controversial, but I think he's really smart. He brought up the idea of like that men used to date Elizabeth Taylor and want to be in her orbit to increase their social cachet and their social status. Taylor perhaps feels like that, and it's very true if you look at her past dating history and like the level of star she is compared to the people she was dating. Like, no one ever knows who fucking Joe Alwyn is. Everyone knows who Taylor Swift is. Just saying.
I mean, he can even be in an Oscar-nominated movie, and my dad's still like, who?
He was in that? So next is Travis's favorite song, on the album, which is Opalite. And this is one that a lot of people out there have been discussing as what like would be like the hit that will come out of it. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I feel like maybe it's going to be, so in All Too Well, how it's like the ever shining jewel, like that like shines, reflects on you. I feel
Yeah.
like maybe Opalite is going to be about like feeling like, because it's about like, I think it says like Opalite's man-made. So I'm wondering if it's going to be like almost the opposite of that and stuff. But I feel like it could also be a love song of like feeling like together you're making this like that isn't a diamond. I don't know. And like it has like references to moonstone and like she's talking about moonstone and gems and so many things that I feel like this is going to be a song that like goes back in time and references other songs. But I don't know what it's going to be about.
Well, so again, I've heard this from the Swiftologist. I've heard this from other people about what opalite is like it's shiny, but it's a fake crystal. So there's not like the value that you would associate with the real diamonds. And perhaps this is like imposter syndrome. Maybe she's afraid, what if I'm not actually a diamond? What if I'm just opalite? So, but the fact
I
that
like that.
this is, but the fact that this is Travis's favorite song, this has to be like a blank space type of vibe. I feel like, I don't know, because that's his also other favorite song besides
Or about
his
him.
songs. Or about him, exactly, right? So, right. So the next two, number 4 and number 5, are Father Figure and Eldest Daughter. And both of these, again, have very provocative titles. They could be literally 10,000 different things. And I wonder how they're going to be upbeat. I think that they will be. I just don't know how. I don't know what her take on these is going to be. I don't know who the father figure is. Again, it could be many different people. You could even interpret it sexually, right? Like the song "Father Figure" with Nicole Kidman. There was a big thing about that. It's not going to be that, but eldest daughter to me is interesting because I think like within the life of a showgirl, being the eldest daughter, I think it's Taylor's view of herself. Almost like looking over younger artists like Sabrina. She's the eldest daughter of people like Sabrina Carpenter. She's been through it all. She knows the games, and she feels like a certain responsibility. What are your thoughts?
I feel the same way about eldest daughter. I feel like it's going to be being like the sister to like the fans and like the other artists growing up or something. I do think, to people who don't know, it is a track 5, and track 5s tend to be the hardest songs. Or I could also like imagine like this being like a story about like Little Women. Like I could see it being something where it's like just like referencing like the sisters or something like that. Or it could be about like one of the Haim sisters, whoever's the oldest, I don't know. Father figure, I immediately thought of it in 2 ways. About like it could literally be a song about her dad, because like we did know that he had some like health scares in this thing. Or it could be about somebody who she looked as a father figure and no longer does. It was like something. Or it could be about like finding love and being like, wow, you would be an amazing father figure if like we had kids together.
Wow.
Choices, but like in my brain, like that's where I went. I'm not
Yeah.
saying like or as if those are the only options. I
No,
don't know.
you're right.
It could be a Mickey Mouse. I don't know. Like, I mean, Taylor can make anything work, I feel like. So
Well, it'll be interesting regardless. So, no, I have no idea what to expect with father figure. You're probably right. It's because like in the New Heights podcast, they talked a lot about her dad, or maybe she feels like she's the father figure. She's like the patriarch of her family. She's
He's
the
daddy.
one that she is daddy. She is the one who, because of her success, like she's so close with her mom and her brother. She also talked about that in the interview with the boys. So, I mean, maybe she feels the responsibility, the burden of being the father figure over her family. If she doesn't deliver for her family, her family doesn't get fed. I mean, that's a huge exaggeration.
yeah.
Don't take it to heart, but that's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think it could also be like about being around men that are just a father figure, like in general, and just talking about when you are surrounded by like solid men and how that feels like so much nicer than being around ones that suck, I guess. Or like I could also see it being about Travis and being like, this is the first time I've been with someone who feels like they could be a father figure, or like, because he is an uncle and he sees her with his nieces or other family members, and maybe he just feels, maybe it's about Andy Reid and how he's a good coach. Who knows?
Well, so next up, even if that one isn't about Travis, I think there's going to be many on here that are about him. So we have Ruin the Friendship, Actually Romantic, and Honey. And those aren't in the order of like the next couple of tracks, but Ruin the Friendship, it does come after Eldest Daughter. And there's always a big switch up from going from 5 to 6. There's always a huge jump. And it's very intentional, and someday we have to talk about it on the show. But as whenever we all saw Ruin the Friendship, everyone assumed that it was going to be Blake Lively. Of course, it's so obvious. But I actually think it's going to be more so like, I'm going to ruin the friendship with Travis by taking it to that next level. We're going to ruin the friendship that we have by by becoming a romantic couple. And then, of course, that will lead into actually romantic. And I also think Honey is just going to be a Travis song. Those are the three that I think will be about him. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I imagine the same thing. I imagine Ruin the Friendship is going to be about something to do with when you have a good friendship with somebody and you want to take it to a different level and you're scared about it. Personally, I don't think she will release a song about Blake Lively if they're friends or not, whatever their relationship's at. Like, she has extremely close relationships with those children. I personally don't think she's going to do that. But she might be singing about like a friendship falling apart in some way, but I don't think it's going to be like this like hit piece on Blake Lively. Like, I don't think that's what it's going to be. I agree that it's more like that whole thing about being like, we have a really good friendship right now. I don't want to ruin it. And I just feel like that makes more sense.
The Blake Lively thing is interesting. But also, I think like if she does sing about Blake and being pulled into this lawsuit, I think it would be more about being pulled into the lawsuit as opposed to a friendship breaking up. And I think it will be in a later album because they also, if she writes a song about this, that becomes part of the lawsuit, that because she's talking about, right? So
totally.
No, not yet.
Yeah, I don't think the one thing that I will say is I don't think Taylor Swift is stupid when it comes to what she puts out there. She's not just going to write a diss track and then put it out. And honestly, I do think that there is a chance that all of this, quote unquote, their friendship breaking up is just actual bullshit. Like, we have no idea. She might just not want to be seen with her so that there isn't any speculation about this lawsuit because I'm sorry, but this is a serious topic. What is being brought up in this lawsuit is important to talk about. I understand that there are a lot of people on different sides, but I think people are taking it a little bit too far and running it with it too fast. We don't even have all of the information and people are taking sides so insanely that I'm like, y'all need to step back.
So what about Actually Romantic and Honey? Do you agree those are Travis songs?
I'm so excited about Actually Romantic. To me, I imagine her talking about things that she thought were romantic and then realizing that what is actually romantic. Like you think that these types of things like flowers and blah, 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 and something is so romantic, but really just like the person who goes to your shows and cheers as loud as he possibly can and his family is supporting you and wants you on the field when he wins or if he loses. To me, that's what's actually romantic. And I feel like it might be something about discovering when you're with the right person what is actually romantic. And then Honey, I'm not sure. I imagined it being literally about like actual honey, like a sexy type of thing, like about like, I want to pour honey on you.
Well, and Travis did have honey poured on him in what's the golf movie?
Oh, yeah.
Happy Gilmore, too.
Happy Gilmore. I was going to say Adam Sandler. And I was like, that's not what the movie's called.
Oh my God. Maybe she wants to put honey on Travis. I don't know. So we shall see. Okay, so there are two songs with stylized titles where she isn't just using grammatically correct English. And obviously for a reason. So we have Canceled, all caps, exclamation point, and Wishlist, where the S's in Wishlist, they are replaced by dollar signs. So we have Canceled and Wishlist. What are your thoughts, Ash?
Imagine Canceled being literally like something's being canceled. I mean, like a couple of her shows got canceled due to like a threat of terrorism. It could be how the press tries to cancel her relationship, how the press tries to cancel all of this type of stuff. I imagine that being a little bit more on the nose, but I'll probably be wrong. Yeah. And then for wish list, I imagine this being like, I have all these things on my wish list, but you're all that I want.
So that's a great guess. And both of those, like, yeah, I think that Wishlist could definitely be a song like that. For me, I think Wishlist is going to be about her masters and possibly getting them. I don't know.
I love that. I like that more than mine.
Just because, like,
said that so I was like a lady in an old movie. Yes, Ryan, you are correct.
Well, she got the masters back. Like, well, we don't know for a fact when she got them back. She got them back sometime this winter. I think winter, spring. And so it could be whatever. So, it could be her wishing she could get her masters back. She would pay anything to have them back. Or it could be about the feeling it is to own your work as a showgirl. So who knows? And then Canceled, I don't know. She's talked about being canceled so much, from Reputation onward, even through Thank You, Amy. I don't know if it's going to be about like cancel culture or her media thing in 2016, Bleachella, whatever. I think that more so it could be about like when a show gets canceled. What does a showgirl do when her show gets canceled? She had shows get canceled this past year because of dark things. So I don't know how dark she's going to go if she really does keep this upbeat, but who knows?
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like it could be an interesting way to finally express how she felt about stuff about when those shows got canceled because it was so dark and obviously very painful. I think it was like a really hard, like I literally cried and my fiance was like, "Why are you crying? You weren't going to that show." I was like, "Well, I'm crying for all the people who were excited to go to shows, but I'm also crying that this was even going to be a thing." Because like it was such a beautiful experience for me and it made me sad, but it could also be about how it was canceled and how those fans turned it into like the most beautiful thing. Like if you look at the footage of all those fans who had their shows canceled, they all were just like so singing together and just like having so much fun in the streets and probably causing a little havoc. And maybe it will be about that.
All right. So next up is Wood. And now this is like the one that is just completely like, I have no idea because like my mind goes to a dirty place and I know that's not going to be it. And
Obviously.
then, right. So it's like number one is dirty. Then the number two is like, ooh, me as an Evermore person. Like I go Evermore, Wood, but that's not what it's going to be. What are your thoughts?
I imagined it going from like WOULD, like wood to wood. It's like, I wish you would.
Oh.
And now it's like, now I got wood.
So we're going to be talking about Travis's Wood.
Yes. I imagine it going from like, I want this to happen. Like, I wish you would take me. And now it's like, you did. And I liked it.
Well, so just for taking the dirty minds out of it, like for a second, could be, so wood is kind of the opposite of dazzle. When you see just bland wood, that's opposite of like color and razzle dazzle pizzazz. The difference of being like all made up versus not. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I love that
But no,
idea too. The idea of like the polar opposite of maybe like a diamond, like shimmering and like the sparkles. And it could be something like he loves me even when I'm just like this, like the and wood. But I feel like there's going to be a play on words with it somehow. Like there's going to be something, or it will literally be wood is not mentioned at all in the song, and it's just like it could be about like building a house together, or you know what I mean, like doing something, and then it's just like a reference, like it's just called wood, and it's not actually like a lyric.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so the last song is The Life of a Showgirl featuring Sabrina Carpenter. This is my most anticipated just because like I love Sabrina and I love the idea of Sabrina and Taylor and like Taylor being like the older sister and Sabrina being the younger sister. I don't know what it's going to be. I assume it's going to be something that kind of ties everything together where they kind of talk about being showgirls and like, in a fun way. I don't think it's going to be especially deep or dark, but I imagine there's also going to be a music video for this at some point. I'm very curious to know what this song could be saying and how it would represent the entire album. When it's being the last song, it captures everything that the album was about. So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I'm excited that she's giving it's interesting that the title track is like a collaboration, that it's featuring somebody on there. I feel like Sabrina might be featured in this a lot more than some of her other features. And I think it's going to be like literally talking about the journey of a showgirl. Like, I think it's literally going to be about like them on the road. I think it's going to be them, the ups and downs of the life of a showgirl, but I think it's going to be like a pop heavy song, like heavy ups and downs. I think it's going to be literally what it sounds like, the life of a showgirl. And I pray that we get a music video because Sabrina Carpenter is so good in music videos. And like, I love, obviously, I think Taylor is too, but I just feel like that dynamic could be so fun. And it is kind of like a mom and like a sister, or a mom and a little girl, or a sister and a older sister. I just feel like it could just be so cute.
The height difference makes it cute. It makes it feel
my gosh,
like mom
I know.
and little girl.
And she's like, oh my God, I feel like the first time they like met in person, she was like, you're so tiny. And like, because Taylor is quite tall for like the average woman and Sabrina is tiny. Like, I feel like she's smaller than I am in like height wise, which is small. I am short, but I think it's going to be like a sultry, fun, showgirly pop song that is just super fun, and it will just like be played everywhere.
What do you think your favorite song is going to be, just as a prediction? Because this will be fun. Because whatever I pick, Taylor has a way of always changing my mind and surprising me.
I imagine Wood or Honey.
I think I don't want to be basic, but I feel like either the first or the last, The Fate of Ophelia or The Life of a Showgirl for me. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay, I'm gonna guess your favorite one is gonna be Opalite.
Okay, cool. And I'm gonna guess yours is gonna be. I think yours is gonna be Honey too. I don't know why. It just feels like Ashley. Yeah, there you go. The squirrels and bees. So bees and bud.
Yep.
Bees and honey. So this is so funny. Okay, so please tell everybody where they can find you online.
You can find me at squirrelandspud9 on Instagram. There you will find stuff about Taylor Swift, at Scream. Ryan and I do our Scream post of the week, where we do a puzzle or some sort of game that you can play. But yeah, find me there and definitely play our games.
All right, everybody. Thank you. We'll see you later in the week for Taylor's new album. And please listen, go see The Life of the Showgirl in theaters. And for Nev Campbell's birthday, we have a very special episode for you coming on Friday, celebrating Nev's birthday with preferences of what we want to see happen in Scream 7 as it regards to Sydney. Over 20 people came to this group Zoom and everybody had something really cool to say. Ashley closed us out with a really wonderful kind of like 10-minute monologue, and it was just kind of blew me away. All right, everybody. We will see you next time.
All copyrighted material used or referenced in this show belong to their rightful owners and made possible by the Fair Use Act.
And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back. Get another beer, you want one? Yeah, sure. I'll be right back!